Life can be painful, and in these times, God can seem so far away, especially when we navigate hardship. Now, hardship makes it easy for us to become discouraged. And though I don't believe not one of us, truly enjoys suffering, it's also a necessary everyday part of life. At some point, you're going to experience hardship. You're going to have employers that can be tough to respect. There's going to be coworkers who make simple tasks just completely complicated because of their harmful character. Within this business place, there's going to be competition that kind of undercuts professional relationships. And in fact, this is just considering in the workplace. But what about our loved ones? What does this look like within our home life? What about our family and friends? What about the mother whose children challenge biblical truth, who mock and poke fun, continually challenging everything that she guides them through because they desire this alternative lifestyle? What about a loved one who's basically cut off his or her family member and refuses to kind of work towards any type of reconciliation? What about a marriage where the spouse has become secretive, no longer walking with the Lord? What about the crushed heart because of adulterous relationships? Or maybe it's the son or daughter whose parents, who once encouraged others through their own passionate faith, now seem to have none at all. What about the loved ones who are struggling through the conversations of sexual freedom and gender expression? How about the children who have never experienced the love of a caregiver? The ones who are abused verbally, physically, mentally? What about the homes or the houses that are divided because of everything that's going on within our political society, political beliefs? Have you ever experienced a crisis in your life? Maybe you can relate to some of the areas just presented, but are you thinking of someone who perhaps mistreated you as I read through some of these things? Can you recall a time where you got the raw end of a deal? Maybe you defined it that way. In these moments, it is so easy for us to get stuck in this mindset that kind of blinds us to God's overall plan when hardship is present within our life. When the relentless waves of life continue to just pound us over and over again, and all we can do is just come up for a really quick breath of air before the next set of struggles or hardship just show up at our doorstep. Walking through hardships and challenging circumstances is not an easy task. And not only is it not easy, it's not fun. But there is a powerful truth that most of us never recognize while navigating through these crazy storms of life. And the truth is that these struggles, these hardships, the betrayals, the things that we face in life, they can powerfully transform our lives if during these times we seek to encounter God in the midst of them. When we step into one of these narratives, we have the choice. We can either choose to entrust our circumstances to the Lord, or we can deal with them ourselves, trying to keep control and, honestly, risking making the situation worse than what's already there. And with all of this, the reality of our now, the reality of our moment, it doesn't always line up with what we dreamed of how our lives would turn out. Sometimes our reality, our circumstances, our hardships can place us in this why me God type of mindset because we have built this illusion that we are in just complete control of everything that takes place in our life. So as we wrap up this series in the beginning, Genesis 37 through 39 is a great place to see what happens when we encounter the troubles and tribulations of life, specifically how the challenges in life define us. So let's pick up Joseph's experience in Genesis 37. Take a look at verses 2 through 11. Joseph, 17-year-old, favored by his father, Jacob. And Joseph has this dream that one day his siblings will be servants to him. And in the midst of all of this, some challenging circumstances begin to develop behind the scenes as his brothers become increasingly hostile towards him. Now, some of this is due to favoritism. Some of this Joseph kind of antagonized by his immaturity. So this hatred for Joseph, it kind of takes shape and grabs his brothers in such a way. So Joseph, clueless about everything that is going on in this hatred, so far away from understanding what's happening, he starts sharing this dream about his future and how his siblings will one day serve him. So as you can imagine, nothing good can be forecasted in this type of perfect storm that was kind of brewing, as you can see in chapter 37, 12 through 36. Some of you are recalling right now at this moment how your very siblings resembled some of this story. Joseph and his actions got him a one-way trip to the cistern. Yet Joseph's life is spared as Judah convinced the other siblings to sell him to the caravan heading to Egypt instead of killing him. So off to Egypt, Joseph went amid hardship, family chaos, and divided home. We see that the Lord was with Joseph, yet what happens next was probably not part of Joseph's dream. As he was sold off and then taken into Egyptian slavery, imagine what Joseph must have been thinking, what he was experiencing. Lord, this is not my dream. In fact, this seems completely opposite of what I dreamed of. How can one enslaved rule over anyone? And furthermore, I have been stripped away from not only the dream, but the very people you said I was to oversee. So as this chaos now becomes Joseph's reality, Genesis 39:2 tells us that the Lord was with Joseph. And Joseph was successful in all of his duties. As a result, Potiphar entrusts to Joseph all that he owns within his kingdom and puts him in charge of his entire household. And then challenging circumstances show up once again. This time, Potiphar's wife wants Joseph to engage with her in this promiscuous activity. Then Joseph refuses, walking in purity, integrity, staying true to the very ways of God. But no matter what, Potiphar's wife continues, attempts, and really tries to get a hold of him. In Genesis 39:12, it tells us that she called him by his cloak and said, "Come with me to bed." But he left his cloak in her hand as he ran out of the house. And then through false accusations, lies, it started to paint Joseph as this criminal, and Joseph was thrown into prison. You can see that in verses 16 to 20. The reality of Joseph's now did not line up with where he dreamed his life to be. It is easy for us to take the "that's what you get" mentality when understanding young Joseph's immaturity in the beginning, his arrogance, and perhaps pompous attitude towards his family. And if we're honest, because of this mindset, this kind of holds us back. We don't get to see the full experience of Joseph's journey through hardship. So the story goes on. Joseph, he continues to suffer because of others. He continues to experience hardship. He continues to experience struggle, even when he displays faithful integrity. Although arrogant in his young life, he was betrayed by his family. He served faithfully to Potiphar, yet betrayed by another and his employer. And this story can be extremely tough because the truth is this: we all have a Joseph story. All of us experience hardship, trials, betrayals, fierce storms in life. And Jesus expressed this reality in John 16:33 when he said, "In this world, you're going to have trouble." But as we travel through trials, many of us assume in these situations that God is not with us. We believe this because we focus more on the trouble in that moment, the trouble within the world, the toughness of the situation, and our circumstances, rather than truly focusing on what is developing inside of us, the maturing, the growth, the ability to overcome. Because the other half of John 16:33 says to take heart, I have overcome the world. But most of us forget that Scripture's message is clear. God's not only present within these times of challenge, within these hardship situations, He's also with us, and He's shaping us internally to overcome these situations stronger in spirituality, maturity, compared to our initial entry into this season of hardship. I find it encouraging that through all of the trials and temptations that Joseph was faced with, he continued to show integrity, honesty, solid work ethics. His actions showed confidence in God. He was faithful to God, even when he may have felt that God was not faithful to him, if we could be honest. Thinking about this, go back and remember the reality and how that sometimes reality now does not always line up with what we dreamed our lives to be. When our realities and our circumstances, our hardships did not line up with your God-given dreams, don't abandon your God-given values as you continue to journey towards this purpose for you. He's designed something for you, but sometimes we can often be challenged when thinking about these things God could have done in our hardships, instead of trusting the very reasons why He didn't step in and intervene in the first place. So what can we all learn from Joseph in his life? First, life is not about what we attain or accomplish, but rather it's about whom we become along the way. It's our shaping throughout the journey. It makes sense to us if we consider some entry-level position in the workplace, right? These positions are designed for entry-level candidates. The jobs are created for those first entering into this profession. Undoubtedly, the majority of these individuals are not yet equipped to obtain this management level role. So why are we so blind to how God develops us in this way spiritually? Second, we must trust God's heart and character when we do not perceive His activity in our lives. In Joseph's case, once in Egypt, he finds himself alone in this strange culture, dealing with strange people, strange practices, to an unknown language. He was purchased as a servant and forced to do slave work, clinging to God despite his circumstances, making no sense, despite experiencing deep emotional pain. The reality of Joseph's experience, it did not line up with what God placed in his dream. And as things begin to look up in this new normal for him, as Joseph walks in the highest integrity and faithfulness and serves his master well, again, what happens? He finds himself back in another type of pit, another type of prison. So what happens when you do everything right and tragedy and suffering still fall upon you? Do you eventually give up on God because life does not make sense? Or do you simply trust the heart of God? Is this your reaction? Remind yourself in the difficulties of life that God is faithful, God is good, right? God is for us, God is with us, and God amongst all things brings restoration. So finally, faith is not a one-time experience, but it is a journey. Even though Joseph was rejected, betrayed, abandoned by his own family, by his employer, he continued to trust God even when things did not line up with what God revealed to him early on. Joseph could have easily given up on God, but he didn't. And our faith is not always a 10 out of 10. We will have times where we struggle with doubt. In fact, we have to wrestle with doubt to have real faith. Remember in Mark chapter 9, verse 24, it reads, sometimes real faith, it kind of comes to the place where we have to say, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. Right? Because sometimes we have to struggle through our current circumstances and situations to continue building, to continue strengthening, to continue finding that cornerstone that gives us this feeble faith. So in closing, I was interested to find that some of the best wines come from grapes that struggle on the vine. I was reading an article that said, struggling vines produces greater wines, and a professional winemaker shared this interesting fact about wine making in the trade and how they grow these grapevines. And it says, if you take a grapevine and make its physical requirements for water and nutrients easily accessible, then somewhat counterintuitively, it will give you poor grapes. However, the object is to kind of stress the vine to work for water. And then the grapes that struggle to get the nutrients, to get the water, they yield the best wine-making grapes. As you navigate the journey that God has placed before you, are you able to recognize areas within your life that require some spiritual growth, some spiritual maturity, and next level discipleship that will only be possible through the experiences of stress, of hardship, of some really uncomfortable circumstances and situations? How is God using these struggles in your life to produce the best of you, which will yield this ultimate purpose that He has planned for your life? It's my prayer that you have found encouragement through Joseph's story. It's also my prayer that you have found the very promises of God and His workings in you, even through some of the most difficult circumstances and situations in your life. So as you dive into this a little bit deeper, go in the very promises of God's faithfulness, equipped in His truth, reflected in God's faithfulness in Joseph's life, reflected in Romans 8:35-39, where it says, "Who can separate us from the love of God? Can troubles or hardships, can persecution, hunger, poverty, danger, could even death?" The answer is nothing. Absolutely nothing. And no matter what comes our way, me and you, we have this overwhelming victory through Him who loved us and gave Himself up for us. So go into this coming week with hope, with joy, confident in the knowledge that God's love goes with you, even in the toughest of circumstances. God bless you. Have a great week.